Muhammad Ali was sitting in his quiet Phoenix home when the phone rang. It wasn't the kind of ring that meant good news. It was the kind of ring that makes your chest tighten before you even pick up. Ali didn't move right away. These days, nothing was fast anymore. His hands trembled as they always did. Not from fear, not from weakness, but from the slow, unforgiving grip of Parkinson's disease, the same illness that had been stealing parts of him for nearly 3 decades. His wife glanced at the phone first. Ali sat in his favorite chair, his body stiff, his breathing shallow, his eyes distant, like he was already tired before the day even began. Picked up, and in the first few seconds her face changed. Her eyebrows pulled together like her heart already knew. Then she looked at Ali, and Ali looked back, not with curiosity, but with something deeper, like he could feel who it was before she even said the name. Covered the phone. "It's Joe's daughter," she whispered. Ali blinked slowly. The room went still. Not a dramatic stillness. A heavy stillness. The kind that carries decades inside it. Listened a little longer, then her voice dropped. What do you mean he's dying?" Ali's eyes didn't move. But something in his face did. A small shift. A flinch. A crack in the armor of a man who once stood fearless against the strongest fighters on earth. His mouth opened slightly as she listened. Then she exhaled, and the next words she said were soft, but sharp enough to cut through time. "He wants to see you." Ali's throat tightened. Joe, the man who once made him feel pain like he had never known. The man he mocked, ridiculed, and tore down with words that were far uglier than any punch. The man he fought like an enemy, even though, once upon a time, Joe had been one of the only people willing to help him. And now, with death at the door, Joe wanted to see Muhammad Ali. For a moment, Ali didn't respond. He just stared forward, his eyes glistening, not crying yet, but close, because the truth is, some wounds don't heal with time. They just get buried. And when life calls them back up, it feels like the wound opens all over again. Lowered the phone, still on the line. She walked closer to Ali. "Mohammed," she said gently, "they say he doesn't have much time." Ali swallowed. His lips moved. His voice, once the loudest voice in sports history, came out as a whisper. "I have to go." Froze. She knew what that meant. Not just travel, not just logistics, but emotional weight, the kind that could crush a man even if his body was healthy. Ali's voice trembled. "I have to go to him," he repeated. And then he added something that made his heart sink. "I have to tell him something I should have said 40 years ago. 40 years. Think about that. 40 years of silence. 40 years of bitterness. 40 years of anger that grew so deep, it became part of history. Because when people talk about Muhammad Ali and Joe, they don't just talk about fights. They talk about a war inside the ring, and a war outside of it. A war of pride. A war of words. A war that destroyed something that never had to be destroyed. And now, in November 2011, Ali was being handed one final chance. A chance to do what he had avoided his whole life. A chance to face the one man who always haunted him in a way no other opponent ever did. Because Joe wasn't just a rival. He was the man who proved Ali could bleed. The man who proved Ali could be humbled. And the man Ali had hurt, in a way that punches could never match. Looked at him and hesitated. "Muhammad, are you sure?" she asked. Ali nodded slowly. The tremble in his hands became more violent, like his body was reacting to the storm rising in his heart. "Yes," he whispered. "It's time." And in that moment, Muhammad Ali wasn't thinking like a champion. He wasn't thinking like a celebrity. He wasn't thinking like the greatest. He was thinking like an old man who knew the clock was running out. because Ali had spent his whole life winning battles. But there was one battle he never truly won. The battle against his own pride. And the sad part, he didn't even realize how much pride had cost him. Until it was almost too late. Turned back to the phone. Her eyes filled with tears. "We'll come," she told Jackie. "We'll come as soon as we can." And when she hung up, the house fell into silence again. Ali stared down at his shaking hands. For a long time, he said nothing. Sat beside him and gently held one of his hands in hers. It felt thin now. Not like the hands that once knocked out Sonny. Not like the hands that once danced around George Foreman. These were hands that struggled to hold a spoon some mornings. Hands that could barely button a shirt. Hands that had fought. And fought. And finally lost. Ali's lips moved again. Not to brag. Not to perform. Not to entertain. Just to confess. "I did him wrong," he whispered. His throat tightened. She didn't respond right away, because what could she say? The whole world knew the story. The whole world knew what Ali had done. But what the world didn't know was what Ali carried in private. Because the truth is, Muhammad Ali didn't just fight Joe. He built a story around Joe. He painted him as a villain. He turned him into a symbol. A target. And the world laughed with Ali. They cheered with Ali. They repeated Ali's insults like they were jokes. But Joe didn't laugh. Joe didn't brush it off. Joe didn't forget. And while Ali became bigger than life, Joe became the man who felt betrayed. Because before all the hatred, there was something else. There was respect. There was brotherhood. There was loyalty. And that's what made the betrayal so painful. Finally spoke. "You're going to tell him you're sorry," she said softly. Ali didn't answer right away. Then, in the smallest voice, he said, "I have to." And now, the question wasn't whether Ali had the courage to fight Joe. He'd already done that 3 times. The real question was, did Muhammad Ali have the courage to face Joe? Without an audience. Without cameras. Without pride. Without jokes. Without defense. Just 2 old men, standing at the end of their lives, looking at the damage they did to each other. Because sometimes, your hardest opponent isn't the man in front of you. It's the guilt you carry inside you. And for Ali, Joe wasn't just a name. He was a reminder. A reminder of everything Ali did to win. And everything Ali lost by doing it. Stood up. "We need to plan," she said, trying to be practical. But Ali wasn't listening. He was somewhere far away now. In his mind, he wasn't in Phoenix. He was back in 1971. Back in New York. Back in Madison Square Garden. Back when 2 men walked into the ring. And neither of them realized. They were about to change each other forever. Ali closed his eyes. And in that silence, the fight began again. Not the punches. Not the crowd. Not the lights. The words. The cruel words. The betrayal. The hate that stretched so far it became part of American sports history. And as Ali sat there, a whisper slipped out of him. Not to anyone else. Almost like he was speaking to the past. "Joe, I should never said those things." And that's when it hit. This wasn't just a story about boxing. This was a story about regret. About pride. About forgiveness that waited too long. And what happened next, when Ali finally stepped into Joe's world one last time, would leave the boxing world in tears. Because the final battle between Muhammad Ali and Joe wasn't in Manila. It wasn't in Madison Square Garden. It wasn't under bright lights. It was in a hospital room, where 2 legends had nothing left to prove. Except one thing: whether a man can undo a lifetime of pain. with one honest sentence, and as began making calls, booking flights, arranging care. Ali stayed sitting there, his trembling hands folded together, like he was praying. And maybe he was, because he knew, when he walked into that hospital room, he wouldn't be walking in as the greatest. He would be walking in as the man who needed forgiveness. And he didn't know if Joe would give it. He didn't know if Joe could. But he knew one thing. If he didn't go now, he would carry this regret to the grave. And Muhammad Ali, who had never been afraid of any man, was finally afraid of one thing: the possibility that it really was too late. Before Joe became Muhammad Ali's greatest rival, he was something else, something far more painful to lose. He was the man who helped Ali when the world turned its back. Most people don't know that part. They only know the screaming crowds, the flashing cameras, the fists flying under bright lights. They know Fight of the Century. They know Thriller in Manila. They know the hatred. But the truth is, the hatred wasn't the beginning. The hatred was the betrayal. And betrayal always hurts more when the person you hurt once loved you. Because long before Ali ever called Joe names, Joe had done something almost no one else did. He stood up for him. It was the late 1960s. Ali had refused to fight in Vietnam. And America didn't just disagree with him. America tried to erase him. His championship was taken. His license was revoked. Sponsors vanished. Friends went silent. The same people who once praised him now called him a traitor. And Muhammad Ali, the loudest man in the world, was suddenly forced into silence. No fights, no paychecks, no spotlight, just days stretching into months, months into years. And behind the scenes, Ali was struggling, not just financially, spiritually, mentally, because when the world punishes you for standing on principle, you start to wonder if the principle was worth the price. Ali didn't admit it publicly because that wasn't who he was. But privately, he was hurting. And that's when Joe stepped forward. Joe wasn't a politician. Joe wasn't a protest leader. Joe wasn't a man chasing headlines. He was a fighter, a hard-working, stubborn, proud fighter from South Carolina. And Joe had his own battles. But despite all that, Joe respected Ali, even admired him. Because deep down, Joe understood something the world didn't. Ali didn't refuse the war out of fear. He refused because he believed it was wrong. And Joe, the man Ali would later destroy with words, supported him. When Ali needed money, Joe helped. When Ali needed support, Joe gave it. And even when other fighters were celebrating Ali's fall, Joe kept quiet. That's what made the betrayal so unforgivable. Because when Joe helped Ali, he didn't do it to gain something. He did it because he believed in loyalty. He believed you don't abandon a man just because the crowd turns against him. And Joe thought Ali would remember that. He thought it meant something. But then, 1971 came. Ali had been allowed back into boxing. The world was ready. Not just ready to see him fight, but ready to see him punished. Because to millions of people, Ali wasn't just a boxer anymore. He was a symbol. And symbols create enemies. Joe was champion now. He had carried boxing while Ali was gone. He had earned his title the hard way. And when Ali returned, the story wrote itself. The fallen king returns to reclaim what was taken. Only one problem. Joe wasn't going to hand anything over. And to sell the fight, Ali did what Ali always did best. He talked, but this time, the talking wasn't playful. It wasn't clever. It wasn't harmless. This time, Ali's words were sharp enough to scar for life. At first, it started like typical hype. A few jokes, a few rhymes, A little showmanship. But then Ali crossed a line. Then another's. Then another's. Because Ali didn't just want to beat Joe in the ring. Ali wanted the world to see Joe as the villain. He needed a villain to build the story. And Joe became the target. Ali called him ugly. He called him stupid. He called him ignorant. But the worst of it wasn't the insults about looks. The worst of it was what Ali implied Joe represented. Ali called him an Uncle Tom. He suggested Joe was a puppet of white America. And in the climate of the early 1970s, those words weren't just insults. They were poison. Because Ali wasn't just attacking Joe the boxer. He was attacking Joe the man. Joe the black man. Joe the father. Joe the human being who had lived through racism in the South, worked his way up, fought for respect. Only to be publicly shamed by someone he once considered a brother. And Joe didn't understand it. He couldn't, because he had been loyal. He had been supportive. He had been there when Ali needed him. So when Ali turned him into a villain, Joe didn't just feel disrespected. He felt used, like he had helped build a man, only for that man to spit in his face when it was convenient. And it didn't stop. Ali kept going. He called Joe a gorilla. He mocked him with cruel impressions. He laughed while doing it. The crowd laughed too, and every laugh felt like another punch. Except Joe couldn't block these, couldn't dodge them, couldn't hit back. Because words don't leave bruises. They leave something worse. They leave shame. And Joe carried that shame like a hidden wound. A wound that didn't bleed outward, but bled inward. And when the night of the fight arrived, March 8th, 1971, Madison Square Garden was electric. Celebrities packed the arena. Photographers crowded the ring. Every seat filled. It was more than a boxing match. It felt like history. Two undefeated heavyweights. Two black champions. Two different versions of pride. Ali walked in like a king. Still cocky. Still loud. Still sure that the world belonged to him. Joe walked in like a storm. Silent. Focused. Anger deep behind his eyes. Because Joe wasn't fighting just for the belt. He was fighting for his name. For his honor. For his dignity. And when the bell rang, it was like two eras colliding. 15 rounds of pure warfare. Not flashy. Not pretty. Just brutal effort and punishment and will. Ali danced and jabbed, trying to prove he was still magic. Joe stalked him, pressing forward, throwing heavy shots like each one carried years of pain. And the longer it went, the clearer it became. Joe wasn't breaking. Joe wasn't afraid. Joe wasn't the villain Ali described. Joe was real. And in the 15th round, it happened. Joe threw a left hook so clean, so violent, so perfect, that Muhammad Ali hit the canvas. For the first time in his professional career, Ali's body bounced against the mat. And in that moment, the world gasped, because the untouchable man had been touched. The greatest had fallen. Ali got up, of course. He always got up. But the message had been delivered. Joe won that fight by unanimous decision. And he deserved it. He had proven himself. He had earned it. But as Joe stood there, champion of the world, something else was happening inside him. Because the victory didn't erase the words. It didn't erase the humiliation. It didn't erase the betrayal. And as the cameras flashed, Joe realized something that would haunt him forever. Ali had made the world hate him. And even when Joe beat him, the world still loved Ali more. And that's when Joe's hatred became permanent. Not the kind of hate that burns hot and fades. The kind that settles deep in your bones. Because Joe didn't just believe Ali insulted him. Joe believed Ali took something from him that could never be returned. his dignity, his peace, his pride. And from that moment on, their rivalry wasn't just about boxing anymore. It was personal. It was painful. It was unforgiving. And what came next, what happened after that first fight, would push both men into darkness. Because if you think the worst was already done, you don't know this story yet. Not even close. Because the real war between Muhammad Ali and Joe was only beginning.